The Stardust Hotel seemed to come alive under the soft light of the setting sun. Once an unremarkable place, it now breathed peace, every corner imbued with attention to detail. Dim light enveloped the walls, on which shadows from elegant vases of fresh flowers played. The light melody of the piano seemed to waft through the air, creating an atmosphere of romance and tranquility. Behind all this splendor watched him, Keanu Reeves. Not as a Hollywood star, but as a man genuinely proud of his child. He liked to observe the life of the hotel, staying in the shadows like an invisible guest. Today he came here not as the owner but as an ordinary visitor, wanting to feel the atmosphere he cherished so much. Dressed simply, in jeans and an inconspicuous jacket, he sought not to attract attention, but simply to enjoy the evening within the walls of his creation. His eyes read a mixture of pride and curiosity. He wanted to see the true attitude of the staff to the guests, not clouded by his famous name. That evening, his attention was caught by the young girl behind the front desk, Emily. Full of enthusiasm, she seemed the epitome of modern ambition, but there was a certain arrogance in her gaze, a habit of judging on first impression. She seemed ready to assess each guest at a glance, not bothering to look for depth. Everything in her world was black and white, and her judgments were quick and categorical. And it seemed that it was this peculiarity of hers that was soon to play its own, rather unexpected role. Evening was descending on Stardust, coloring everything around them in warm, golden tones. Keanu, in his unassuming attire, approached the front desk where Emily was waiting for him. The girl, immersed in the digital world of her phone, looked away from the screen with obvious reluctance. Her gaze slid over Keanu and immediately gave her verdict. One of many, not a shadow of recognition, not a spark of respect, just a slight, barely perceptible, contemptuous smirk. From the very first seconds of their conversation, Emily seemed intent on showing her superiority. Her tone was soaked with condescension, and her caustic remarks seemed to fall on their own. She looked down on his clothes, casually tossing off a few sentences about how he must be in the wrong place. Her doubts about his ability to pay sounded as confident as if she knew for certain the contents of his wallet. Keanu, a man accustomed to a different attitude, nonchalantly tried to explain that he would like to book a room, but his attempts were futile. Emily didn't seem to hear his words, continuing her monologue about his inadequacy and unsuitable appearance. A slight frustration was rising inside Keanu, mixed with faint resentment. He, the owner of this hotel, faced such neglect on the doorstep of his own home. But as always, he remained calm, watching her reaction, as if studying her behavior as a pattern, as an example. Emily, on the other hand, was full of pride in her shrewdness. She seemed to savor the moment, believing that her work experience allowed her to unmistakably identify unreliable visitors. She had no idea that she was humiliating not just a customer, but her own boss, the man who had put his soul into creating this place. Her self-confidence was so great that she didn't even allow herself to think of a possible mistake, not realizing that this night would bring her very different discoveries. He approached the front desk, hoping for a relaxed start to his experiment. Keanu calmly announced his reservation, but Emily, with barely concealed irritation, interrupted him. "We don't have any rooms available," she cut him off, her tone full of disdain. She hinted that he probably had the wrong hotel, and her words sounded more like an insult than a statement of fact. Her mocking tone became more and more contemptuous, as if she were not a guest but a delinquent schoolboy. The other hotel employees watching the scene began to glance around nervously, sensing the growing awkwardness of the situation. Keanu tried to keep his composure, but frustration was ripening inside him. He realized that he had encountered more than just a booking error. Deciding not to reveal his identity, he discreetly inquired about contacting the manager. Emily, grinning, replied that the manager was extremely busy and certainly wouldn't waste her time on someone like him. A sense of humiliation was building inside Keanu, but at the same time he realized that this was a cruel but necessary test for his staff. He could see Emily's self-confidence growing with every barbed word she spoke. She thought she had cleverly put the insolent visitor in his place, not realizing that the owner of all this splendor was standing in front of her. Her self-confidence was bordering on insolence, and it made Keanu not only disappointed, but also eager to remedy the situation. Tension hung in the air, and it seemed that the situation had reached its climax. But the invisible hand of fate was already preparing a new turn that would undoubtedly change everything. And so, when it seemed that Emily was ready to put Keanu out of the door, like an annoying vagrant, fate decided to intervene. At this very moment, like a guardian angel of the hotel, on the stage came Mr. Harris, the general manager. He, unfortunately for Emily, became an unwitting witness to the last lines of this strange dialogue. His face showed complete bewilderment and then embarrassment at the unconcealed rudeness of his subordinate. With a slight hesitation in his voice, he politely turned to Keanu, wanting to know what was the matter. Keanu, as before, remained strikingly calm, only briefly and without pressure stated the essence of what had happened. His words sounded even, without a hint of resentment or anger. Mr. Harris, listening, literally turned pale as he realized that this self-confident girl had allowed herself to do such a thing to the very owner of the hotel. His speech was slurred, and horror froze in his eyes. Keanu, noticing his condition, tried to calm the manager, as if he was the injured party. And then came the moment of truth. With a slight, almost gentle smile, Keanu introduced himself to Emily as the owner of Stardust. In that instant, time seemed to stop for Emily. Self-confidence crumbled like a house of cards, giving way to overwhelming panic and shame. The ground seemed to be slipping from under her feet. Mr. Harris, for his part, was relieved that Keanu's anger had not fallen on him, but his anxiety about Emily's fate had not disappeared. He couldn't predict what the owner's next word would be, or what awaited the delinquent employee. It was a moment of silence filled with tension and anticipation. Emily froze as if caught in the spotlight, words stuck in her throat like caged birds. She tried to say something to justify herself, but her babble sounded pathetic and unconvincing. Keanu, contrary to expectations, didn't raise his voice, didn't shout. He spoke evenly, calmly, but every word he said, like a blade, cut the girl's ego. He explained that such behavior was unacceptable, that it contradicted all the standards of his hotel, where every guest should feel welcome and respected. He asked her to reflect on her mistakes, promising that something like this would not happen again. Judging people by their cover is a huge mistake, Emily, he said with a faint sadness. True respect is shown in the way everyone is treated, regardless of appearance. At that moment, Emily seemed to have an epiphany. The veil of arrogance and snobbery fell from her eyes, revealing the stupidity and baseness of her act. A wave of shame came over her, burning her from the inside out. She quietly but sincerely apologized to Keanu, vowing to become more attentive and sensitive to every visitor. The look in Keanu's eyes was not one of gloating, but rather of satisfaction that the lesson had been learned without shouting and humiliation. He saw potential in this girl, hoped that she could become a better person. Emily, for her part, felt not only burning shame and remorse, but also a strange gratitude that she had been given a chance to improve, to see her mistakes and draw conclusions. She realized that arrogance and prejudice are not a sign of strength, but rather a sign of weakness and short-sightedness. But this story seems to have other facets hidden from the first glance. And so when the dust settled and the tension dissipated, Keanu stayed within the walls of his hotel not as an owner, but as a guest, watching the evening life of Stardust. There was something elusive changed in the air. Since that memorable incident, the staff, and especially Emily, seemed to have become more empathetic, more attentive to everyone who crossed the threshold. Condemnation had been replaced by a genuine desire to understand and please. Emily, whose cheeks had been flaming with shame, now greeted each guest with a smile that was not merely polite, but genuinely warm and caring. It was as if she realized that behind each person there was a story, hopes and expectations, and that her task was to make everyone's stay at the hotel unforgettable in the best sense of the word. Keanu, watching her transformation, felt more than just the satisfaction of restoring justice. He had seen something beautiful sprout from clumsy, sometimes callous behavior, like a flower blooming after a rainstorm. The evening wrapped the hotel in soft light, creating an atmosphere of comfort and tranquility. The sounds of soft jazz coming from the bar created a romantic aura in which everyone could find something different. Keanu, sitting in the lobby, watched this transformation. How his humble presence changed not only the behavior of the staff, but perhaps their perception of the world as well. He thought about how important it is to be considerate of everyone, how easy it is to judge by the cover, and how much can be lost by not looking within. This story was a lesson not only for Emily, but for anyone prone to jumping to conclusions. It showed that the most unexpected situations can hide opportunities for growth and self-improvement, and that even the humblest owner can teach a lesson that will change not only the lives of individuals, but the atmosphere of an entire place. Such events sometimes open doors to other perspectives, touching deeper strings of human relationships.